Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
UN warns of rising sectarian killings in Syria as gunmen attack pro-Assad TV channel. Deadly attacks hit Iraq as Prime Minister al-Maliki calls for early elections. And Sudanese opposition fails to sign post-Bashir political charter. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The Syrian Revolution General Commission said 17 people were killed in various regions of Syria, most of them in Idlib and the countryside of Damascus. Shelling continued in parts of Idlib, Homs, Deir ez-Zor, Daraa, Hama, and the countryside of Damascus. Activists said the towns of Khana Sabul, Sarja, and Abu Samis have been shelled since dawn, leading to casualties. Imad Sara, director of the news channel Al-Ekhbariya, denounced the attack on the channel this morning. He said the opposition has no desire to convey the opinions of others.
3 of our journalists were martyred, and of course their only crime was conveying words that you all know well, words of truth, words that express the other point of view. They conveyed the message of their freedoms in their own way. As such, they were targeted.
Human rights investigators in the United Nations released a report today that says the violence in Syria is spiraling out of control. According to the report, the Syrian government is using combat helicopters and artillery to shell residential neighborhoods. It points to the increasing number of sectarian attacks. The report adds that a number of Syrian regions have descended into civil war since the UN-backed ceasefire this past April. However, Karim Abu Zaid, one of the UN investigators who prepared the report, insisted that there is still ambiguity around the Hula massacre.
The threat of a civil war between numerous opponents is looming over all of Syria. UN investigators submitted a report to the Human Rights Council warning that vast parts of the country are on the brink of war.
We are gravely concerned by the latest reports.
We're gravely concerned by the latest reports of an upsurge in violence and the growing military operations by government forces and armed opposition groups. Innocent civilians are caught in the line of fire. The international observers are subject to serious dangers as well.
The UN Human Rights Council listened to the testimonies of the investigators, whose delegation visited Syria, documented the events there with images and videos, and conducted live interviews. The Hula massacre, where an entire family was killed, and the world's horrified reaction to it were important parts of the report.
The manner in which these killings took place resembles those previously and repeatedly documented to have been committed by the government. While the Commission cannot rule out the possibility that the opposition fighters are responsible for the killings, it does not believe that is likely.
Representatives of Western countries and some Arab countries held the Syrian government responsible for the continuing violence. Qatar called for referring the issue to the Security Council in order to issue a resolution under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. As for Washington, it adhered to condemning President Bashar al-Assad's regime.
The Assad regime is waging a brutal campaign against the Syrian people, characterized by aerial bombardment, mass killings, rape, and other atrocities.
The report criticized Syria's armed opposition and accused it of committing violations and of using children in missions that exposed them to the dangers of fighting. However, the basis of the report was completely rejected by the Syrian government and its allies. The Venezuelan representative believed that certain parties, which he described as imperialist, are seeking to sabotage the Kofi Annan plan and push the situation toward a Libya-style military intervention. Meanwhile, the Syrian representative reiterated his president's statement that Syria is engaged in a real war.
My country's delegation will not take part in this session in protest of the bias and politicization of the situation.
While waiting to reach a political settlement that all relevant parties in the Syrian issue can agree upon, the Human Rights Council's discussion remains impeded by international disagreement on how to approach the crisis. The Syrian dissidents and anti-regime protesters consider this disagreement a mere excuse for the international community's failure in dealing with the matter. Wael Hajar, BBC.
Iraqi security and medical sources reported that 11 people were killed and at least 13 were wounded in separate attacks on Baghdad this morning.
The sources said that 2 explosive devices were detonated in the al-Madayin area south of Baghdad, while a third bomb exploded in al-Ghazaliyah in the western part of the capital.
Jassim, in his mid-30s, is selling his goods by the roadside in central Baghdad. Once a fighter in the Al-Sahwa Council, he became a fuel seller after the balance of justice was lost, and the protective umbrella for his safety and source of livelihood disappeared, as he said.
We ended up running a stand on the street. What do you expect us to do? The government is not helping us. I've had no salary since I quit Al-Sahwa.
The pictures of dead Al-Sahwa members were hung in the streets in their memory, while there is a perpetual fear that the remaining fighters will be targeted. The Al-Sahwa militia in Iraq is caught between a rock and a hard place. Al-Qaeda and other parties still target its members. Their eyes are filled with fear, and their psychological and financial condition is sorrowful. At the end of 2006, Iraq's tribal members were enlisted in what is known as Al-Sahwa councils, with the U.S. and Iraqi forces to fight al-Qaeda, which has been largely weakened compared to the past. Many Al-Sahwa members were killed, causing much controversy over the militia's approach and the motives of its establishment. The Iraqi government attempted to integrate former Al-Sahwa members into the state's institutions. However, the move was met with many reservations, even from the Al-Sahwa leaders themselves. They described some of their jobs as inappropriate.
I say to you, it's unreasonable that those who carried rifles, stayed up late at night to maintain security and stability, and fought crimes, are now turning into street cleaners.
In turn, the Iraqi government believes that the education level of the Al-Sahwa members determines their type of work, while placing the blame on parliament.
Our brothers in parliament withheld 69 billion dinars. We don't have much to allocate in a way that does not affect the disbursement of salaries. 1/3 of the budget is being spent under suspicious conditions and is sometimes politicized.
It is said that Al-Sahwa fighters are still targeted by a number of parties, most notably Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, the Al-Sahwa members continue to bury their dead. Nasser Shadid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
On to Iraq, political tension is simmering there. The Prime Minister has called for early elections. Al-Maliki accuses political rivals of purposefully rejecting dialogue. He says his opponents are trying to cause a political crisis. According to the Iraqi constitution, the parliament can be dissolved by the request of the Prime Minister and with the consent of the President. Maliki's challengers, led by the Iraqi bloc, have openly attempted to unseat him. An effort to persuade President Jalal Talabani to call no-confidence votes stalled earlier this month when he said Maliki's opponents lacked enough votes to oust him. Now they are requesting the Prime Minister appear before Parliament. Tensions have been on the rise since Baghdad issued an arrest warrant for fugitive Vice President Tariq al-Hashimi. He faces terrorism charges over accusations of running a death squad. Newly released Bahraini activist Nabil Rajab says he is determined to continue his protests against the government until the goals of the revolution are achieved.
I was imprisoned for criticizing the authorities. The Bahraini government thinks detention and crackdown will silence the anti-government campaign. But as I said before, this only increases our resistance. We will continue fighting against tyranny and despotism, against which this nation stood up on February the 14th, till our demands are met.
Nabil Rajab was released 3 weeks after his arrest. He was detained on the 6th of June for using social media to incite anti-government protests. People are out on the streets in the Persian Gulf Kingdom to show their outrage at the regime, and it looks like the Saudi-backed crackdown is doing nothing to stop them. Here you can see people in the village of Sitra blocking main roads by setting tires ablaze. Not long after this, Saudi-backed forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse them. Since the beginning of the revolution last year, scores of Bahrainis have been killed or detained.
The campaign waged by the Sudanese government against its anti-government protesters has pushed the U.S. State Department to issue a statement condemning the Sudanese government's arrest and beating of protesters. It considered these procedures inconsistent. However, international condemnation did not prevent Khartoum's government from waging a new arrest campaign targeting Sudanese opposition parties, especially since they started a new movement under the banner of toppling the regime. The meeting that was held last night to sign two proposed charters to manage the country during the transitional period following the regime's collapse was postponed until next week after they failed to reach an agreement. From Khartoum, our reporter, Sami al-Shnawi.
Sudan is bracing for a hot summer as the Sudanese opposition heightens its tone against al-Khartoum and threatens to topple al-Bashir's regime. However, the two proposals for the country's transition following the downfall of the regime are yet to be finalized. Despite its claim of unity, the opposition failed to sign the democratic change document and the constitutional declaration. It postponed the meeting until next week for further discussion of the provisions of the drafting process.
The parties are meeting in order to prevent any chaos that may erupt after the departure of the hated regime. You know what could happen in the country. We want to maintain order and came here to try to reach an agreement.
Some describe the move as preemptive, which may stir fears among the demonstrators that parties previously affiliated with the regime may rise to power. The ruling party immediately described the opposition's demands for democratic change as wishful thinking. It is a matter that widened the gap between the two sides, prompting the ruling party to launch a wide-scale arrest campaign targeting opposition groups.
It is a slogan that we kept hearing for 24 years. We kept saying it will end in a week, month, 2 months, but it kept on. We are still hearing this slogan, and the people don't think much of it.
During the past 2 months, the political opposition parties, through designated committees, held a series of meetings to draft a constitutional declaration, which stipulated a peaceful transition of power and the formation of an interim government that will run the country in case the current regime collapses. Meanwhile, observers are downplaying the importance of the opposition's next steps due to the widening gap between the angry Sudanese street over the austerity measures that do not meet their demands and the opposition, which is seeking regime change. Sami al-Shnawi, Dubai TV, Al-Khartoum.
The Moroccan Coalition for Human Rights and the Committee Against Torture demanded that authorities open their prisons to rights organizations and investigate complaints presented by prisoners who were subject to torture. This comes after these two organizations presented reports that confirmed the continuation of torture in police stations, prisons, and secret detention facilities.
Although
the new constitution forbids torture, and the Interior Minister assured Parliament the government would not allow the practice of torture or abuse at police stations, the reports presented by the Moroccan Coalition for Human Rights and the Committee Against Torture at a meeting in Rabat confirm that torture is still practiced at police stations, secret detention facilities, and prisons.
We denounce and reject torture in any form. We demand an investigation into all allegations and claims of torture.
Contrary to previous reports, the committee was keen to present actual reports about prisoners who are subject to torture. Among them are civilians who participated in peaceful protests.
Anyone demanding their rights is thrown in prison and is subject to human rights violations, and their voice is silenced.
In addition to the government, the Committee Against Torture condemned the judiciary's refusal to look into all of the demands regarding torture cases, asserting that the judiciary still plays a negative role in whitewashing human rights violations.
In the history of Morocco, there has never been any judicial ruling against any individual or security official who took part in the torture of citizens.
وفيما تؤكد الحكومة على احترام حقوق الإنسان وعلى تجريم القانون الجنائي.
Despite the government's assurance that it respects human rights and criminalizes torture, rights organizations demand that the Minister of Justice ratify the supplementary optional protocol to the International Convention Against Torture, which stipulates formation of a civilian committee to investigate torture cases apart from official bodies. They also demand opening the prison doors to the Committee Against Torture, which has not been able to enter prisons despite its establishment 3 years ago. In the Lebanese capital yesterday, a number of roads were blocked and cars were attacked, turning Beirut's night into one that resembles those of futile wars. Charbel Aboud reports.
Its largest impact is psychological, but it also affects the country's history, security, and economy. The Lebanese people in Beirut went to sleep with the black smoke of burning tires, which was followed by gunfire and an attack on new TV. Today, the government is preparing for a security month. It says will cover all Lebanese regions, including Beirut's southern suburb of Dahiyeh. The step is the result of security incidents that moved from region to region in Beirut and included burning tires and garbage bins that rolled from one site to another, and gunfire that terrorized those safe in their homes. On the evening of the initiation of Security Month, the people's views varied between those who welcome the initiative and those who have already lost all hope.
It's been a failure for 30 years.
The state is nothing without security. That's the most important thing. All I ask from the state is to impose security. I don't want anything else.
I wish the state would capture everyone that's destabilizing the security and get them out of the street.
It's complete rubbish. The situation is unbearable.
The state is supposed to provide security and stability.
I think the whole state should be changed, no?
This time, the attack targeted new TV, then spread to different neighborhoods of the capital as roads were blocked and residents were terrorized. The hope is for the security forces to determine their tactics and for the government to take action before these attacks become a way of life, with black smoke coloring the days of Lebanon. Along with its failure to solve the economic crises, the government also failed to deal with the security issue. So the question today is who will protect the Lebanese living under a government that has failed to secure even the most basic conditions for security and stability. Charbel Aboud, Future TV.
Even by Iranian standards, Vice President Mohamad-Reza has delivered an anti-Semitic speech that crosses all lines with its viciousness. Speaking at a United Nations International Anti-Drug Conference in Tehran, Rahimi said that Zionists were responsible for the illegal drug trade across the globe. He went on to claim that a central Jewish text, the Talmud, encourages Jews to believe they are the world's superior race and that other nations should serve the Jews. The speech shocked and angered diplomats from a number of countries who attended the UN-sponsored gathering. Reacting to the comments, Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman noted that Hitler also said crazy things, and he warned that the world has not yet fully understood the threat that Iran poses. The state budget deficit will grow by 15 billion shekels, but taxes will not go up. This according to a plan presented by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz that would raise the deficit to 3%. More now on this report from IBA's Aaron Viner.
Israelis awoke to welcome news from Prime Minister Netanyahu that taxes will not have to be raised next year because of his decision to increase the 2013 budget deficit goal to 3%. Netanyahu said he acted to exercise fiscal responsibility alongside a responsible and real economic framework, adding that important national programs will be maintained. The government will still have to cut 6.5 billion shekels from the budget, although Netanyahu has refused to rescind his promise of free preschool education from the age of 3. The program is due to begin in just 2 months and was one of the central proposals advocated by the Trachtenberg Committee on Socioeconomic Change that the government appointed following last summer's mass protests. The government took a lot of heat for its decision to increase value-added tax from 16% to 17% on July 1st as a move that will most affect the nation's impoverished citizens. It's not known if last night's decision will affect the slated 1% increase that is expected to generate 5 billion shekels in revenue. The public sector is hoping that the increased deficit will also permit the government to forego further hikes on income tax and levies imposed on gasoline. The Premier said that he and Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz envisioned that the projected deficit will fall to 2% of GDP in 4 years and 1.5% GDP by 2019. The ratio of government debt to GDP now stands at 74%, and by 2020 will be lowered to 60%, which is the critical upper limit necessary for Israel's eventual entry into the European Union. According to Steinitz, the long-term deficit targets are mandated by a decline in state revenues. He described the nation's debt as conservative and lower than most Western countries, adding that the update was determined following a long series of discussions with the Prime Minister's office, Treasury, and Bank of Israel officials. The majority of senior Treasury officials, however, reportedly advocated that the deficit target be raised to just 2.5%, and the Netanyahu-Steinitz agreement has sparked criticism over the decision-making process on major economic policy. The two met without Bank of Israel Governor Stanley Fischer, who also reportedly objects to increasing the deficit. While hailing the 3% decision as a step in the right direction, opposition chairwoman Shelley Yachimovich said that it doesn't go far enough and that the proposed deep cutbacks will critically harm the nation's public security, health, and education sectors. The plan will be submitted for cabinet approval this coming Sunday. This is Erin Viner for IBA News.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.